I therefore welcome the new Japanese Prime Minister's commitment to this end. He had indicated he will cut by 25% and hope that other leaders in industrialized countries will follow his lead. But other countries have responsibilities too. The big emerging economies, such as Brazil, China, India, South Africa, Mexico, feel passionately that their economic prospects must not be penalized or compromised. They are right, but they too must lower emissions relative to a business-as-usual scenario. As for the least developed countries, they have, in theory, scope to increase their emissions. However, the way forward is to secure economic growth and social progress without proportionate increase in emissions. Least developed countries deserve financial incentives to benefit from the role they can play in contributing to global emissions reductions, including through sustainable land use, forest protection, and reforestation. Fairness means implementation of the polluter pays principle. This should apply to countries, to companies, institutions, as well as individuals. And by individuals, I often say that those who walk or ride bicycles need not be obliged to subsidize those who insist on driving SUVs. And there's a policy issue here which governments can do a lot about. Fairness also requires accelerated support by industrialized countries for mitigation and adaptation measures in developing countries. They need help to protect their citizens from the impact of climate change now and the inevitable acceleration of these changes in the future. This must include not just a major increase in funding in addition to existing development assistance, which are currently not always met, but also a transfer of resources, transfer of knowledge and technology to allow them to transition to low carbon economies. Issues that still need to be resolved include the cost of adaptation and how it is measured. How much more money is needed, how it will be raised, and once raised, how it will be managed and disbursed. But one thing is already clear. The sums so far committed are simply nowhere near enough. Nicholas Stern estimates that the cost of action on climate change in Africa alone will amount to 30 billion a year by 2015, rising to 50 to 100 billion a year by the 2020s, with adaptation needs taking the lion's share of that sum. So I also welcome Prime Minister Gordon Brown's support of 100 billion a year by 2020, with money coming on stream from 2013. But we are a long way yet from mobilizing the money, let alone reaching binding agreements that will provide developing countries with a predictable and sustainable level of funding. These extra funds will have to be raised from a new and innovative sources of funding, including the carbon market. So the governments have a lot to do. The private sector will have a role to play. We need to put a price on carbon, not just as a way of providing funds, but also to provide real incentives to reduce its production and consumption. The point is that leadership has never been more needed than it will be in the coming weeks and months. It needs political leaders to demonstrate vision and courage, to manage the threats and grasp the opportunities, they have to put aside narrow and sectional interest. Narrow national and sectional interests have to be set aside. Otherwise, I don't see how they can pull together and come to an agreement. Above all, we need leaders to focus on the long term and the well-being of future generations and ignore the usual electoral cycles, which all too often restrain action. Where will this leadership come from? The U.S. is the indispensable nation. China may have overtaken it as the world's biggest source of carbon emissions, but the U.S. per capita emission are still over 4 times as big as China's and twice as high as Europe's. President Obama has said about climate change, the science is beyond dispute and the facts are clear, and that delay is no longer an option. I agree with him, and I think we all do. He has expressed his determination that the U.S. leads the world in a new era of global cooperation on climate change. It would be tragic if his willingness to lead on the global stage was undermined at home. You must help him succeed. So too must other heads of states. Each head of state or government has a responsibility to give clear instructions to their negotiators to make a deal in Copenhagen. I say this because we often hear, "Oh, I'm sending my negotiators. They are at the table." What's the point of sending negotiators who are at the table and negotiate and negotiate and negotiate, but never seem to strike a deal? And it will help if they are given clear instructions by their heads of states that we want action, we want an agreement. And I hope this will happen, and the heads of states will send their negotiators with clear mandates. But leadership should not be confined to politicians alone. The business sector, the U.S. corporations in particular, have a major responsibility to maximize the negative impacts, to minimize the negative impacts. They also have an opportunity to invest in clean energy and infrastructure, whether here at home or abroad, including in the developing countries. This country's genius and technological capacity means it will provide many of the advances which will help us combat climate change now and in the future. This also requires business leaders to ensure that their pursuit of profits does not result in unnecessary barriers that will prevent developing countries from accessing the knowledge and technology they need to lower the carbon emissions. And the academic world, a university like yours, can lead, as you're doing here in Colombia, by bringing different disciplines together to find solutions. Just as climate change ignores national borders, it does not stop at departmental boundaries. And as individuals, we can make contribution by the choices we make every day. We can lead by example. We can modify our behavior and our consumption patterns to reduce our carbon footprint, whether in terms of the food we eat, the transport we use, or the energy we consume. Do consider, my young friends, courses or even careers that will engage you in providing solutions to the climate challenge. Lobby your congressmen, lobby your congresswomen, and demand an ambitious, effective, and fair climate change agreement. Network through social media to inform people what can be done about climate change. Please get involved, each and every one of you.